She got caught in a trap that her body secretly and without her knowledge needed. Sandra and her friend Mary joined the WI a year ago. They both loved it, and when they were asked to apply for the committee, and they both did so. Sandra felt she was good enough with her own money that she could run for treasurer. Mary only wanted a general role on the committee. Both Mary and Sandra will be at the AGM. They were voted in, and Sandra was talking to Mrs. Johnson 30 minutes after that. The treasurer is leaving. Meetings were set up so Mrs. Johnson could hand over the job she had held for 5 years. Sandra felt a little uneasy when she was with this 59-year-old ex-headmistress who was pretty and had a big body. Sandra had always taken the easy way out, whether she was at school or home. If she had been brave enough to take a good look at herself at the time, if she were honest with herself, she'd have to say she was more than a little bit submissive. Peter was always the whether it was about furniture or decor, he had the last word around the house. Even though Sandra often thought she'd like him to be more aggressive, he was the one who was in charge. She never spoke up, but Telly she had seen Peter looking at 1 or 2 things. Some of them she discovered on her website, and some of them surprised and excited her. One of his most important things that she said the moment was anal sex, big men making young girls' butts gape open and redraw, she said. She thought about whether he would ever try to get her to do something so dirty. He didn't close the other sites. She thought he had been looking at this site for a long time because his problems just now were much worse. I'm looking at what's popular. She knew that when she opened the pages on the screen, she should have felt disgusted, but she didn't. It didn't happen. The things she saw started to fill her mind, and they even every time she went to sleep. She had no idea that being a WI would change her life for good. Satisfy all of her sexual desires. Before Sandra could ring the bell, Mrs. Johnson opened the door with the big dog at her heels. Sandra's audible gasp. Mrs. Johnson just smiled at her and led her to the dining room, where the WI books were spread out on the table in the dining room. Sandra sat nervously and looked through the books while sipping the fresh lemonade, which had a strong taste. Mrs. Johnson leaned over her shoulder so close that she could feel her breath on her neck. Within minutes, she had figured out how to read the books and was calling Mrs. Johnson. Elaine was so calm that when Elaine massaged her shoulders, she almost fell asleep unnoticed. Elaine spoke softly and close to Sandra's ear in almost hypnotic tones. That happened when she felt Max's fur rub against her lower leg, her whole body reacted and her breath started. She felt like her heart was racing, that butterflies were taking over her stomach, and that her pussy felt very strange. She thought Max would leave, but now her stocking-covered leg felt wet. The dog was petting her with its nose. Sandra started to flex her thighs without even thinking about it. Elaine was quietly watching what was going on. With a cruel smile on her face, I watched as Max took advantage of his prey, which he knew how to do. Elaine knew quite a lot about Sandra. While under pressure, her good friend Mary let the cat out of the bag. She had told Mrs. Johnson everything Sandra thought and dreamt about dogs. And she knew that once she caught Sandra, she could focus on getting the 2 of them. She wanted Mary and Sandra as soon as she saw them. As the wet nose went up Sandra's skirt, all she could feel was excitement. Elaine gasped when she saw that her skirt was being pulled up to her waist. Sandra was happy to wear her stocking tops and suspenders. It was a very exciting time. Sandra held onto the table tightly, closed her eyes, and tried to stop her heart from beating, but that didn't help. Worsening things, she immediately saw the things that had been on her mind for a long time. She was worried she might start breathing too fast. She opens her eyes wide because she wants to stop the invasion of her body. Max didn't reach his goal until it was too late. The tongue had his first taste of soggy, wet diapers. That tongue beat that tongue in seconds. The path a few times, he knew Sandra was his girl. Her pussy leaked like never before, and she pulled her pants down without even realizing it. She pushed it to the side, and when she looked down, she couldn't believe what she saw. Not only had she pushed it, she leaned back on the chair to make room for her legs, but her hands were in Max's hair and she was pulling him toward her. She kept getting shocked. She felt lips kissing her and a tongue dancing in her mouth. With her tongue, she enticed it into the mouth that was waiting for it. Then, with her lips and teeth, she seduced it. As they surfaced for air, she looked into the eyes of a different man. Elaine's face still looked hard and cruel, but she was different in every other way. It was a tight bun gone, with auburn hair that hung down over her shoulders, red lips with fresh lipstick, and thick eyes filled with mascara. A leather collar was around her neck, and her wild hair was held up by her tight leather buster pushes her big tits up, her long and firm nipples poking out. Sandra. I looked down and took in the full sight of Elaine's legs, which were covered in sheer black. She wore stockings and black stiletto heels that were strapped to her feet. Elaine's beard was shaved clean. Sandra could see that her lips were swollen and red from excitement. With moisture dripping from her lips, she let this older woman pick her up. She sat there, telling the big dog to step back while she did it. Then she took her to an area rug. At the end of the table, she knelt, and her hands pushed her down, which made her rear end go up. Sandra did everything. She was told to do something without saying a word. She still didn't know what was going to happen. Set her to max. Sandra didn't fight as she felt the heavy weight of the new girl. He got on her back and poked her with a pencil, finding her hole once, twice, and then 3 times. He was already at the door, so he didn't need to be asked in again. Once he was buried in that grave, while he was waiting, he began to grow to his full size. She thought back to how skinny and long Max had felt. When he first went in, he was like a long finger that was getting longer as he fucked her. It seemed to be the biggest thing she'd ever had up her sleeve. She loved the way he hit her eager child quickly and hard. When he pushed, she could feel the point of his sharp poke at her tiny cervix open her up, and she felt a growing lump at the same time. She rubbed her soft lips, which made her want her even more. It had only been a few minutes, but she already felt like she was going to new heights. She buries herself in a huge, spine-tingling orgasm, with her clitoral sphincter gripping that huge dog cock buried up her messy cut. She felt the lump she had been pushing on move into her body and start to fill out more. She had just finished one orgasm when she was pushed into another. When this fist-sized ball got inside her body, it stretched her chest walls. Sandra's cock was stretched as it had never been stretched before as Max's knot grew to its full size. Warm dog sperm kept spraying her cunt after it went through her cervix. The walls were never-ending, so her orgasm went on longer and better than she could have hoped. Had never been through before. It took Max a full 20 minutes to get his cock out of his new toy, but Elaine had more in mind for Sandra than just this. She had been giving a running. People said nasty things about Sandra, like slut, dog whore, and dog-loving spunk slag. While pushing the woman to go higher, push back and grab that dog's cock hard. Dog spunk. She kept rubbing her buttocks on Sandra's face, with her legs spread out on either side. Sandra's ears, smiley face. Suck me, suck my crotch, you filthy dog slut, eat my juices. Sandra didn't even kiss or even pay attention to what was being said until her orgasm started to fade. Then she listened to what was being said. Elaine's crotch smelled bad, and it seemed natural for her to do something about it. Just what Elaine asked for. Sandra couldn't get enough. She had never thought of doing something like that before, but with her. The smell and taste, along with her excitement, pushed her to reach new heights. Most importantly, both women were sad that it was over so soon, with Elaine screaming through Max, who went to the corner of the room after having a huge erection and rolling away from Sandra, licking his soft behind. Before the women got up, it was a long time. Elaine helped clean and dress Sandra. They spent time talking about what she had become and what her new boss expected of her. Sandra, they never fought, and even agreed that the books should be checked again. The next day, it would take a whole day to finish. Sandra took Elaine's word for it when she kissed her as she left to go see her new boyfriend. Elaine cleaned the glasses they had used, and the little brown bottle was still on the kitchen counter. She smiled as she put the strong aphrodisiac back in the cabinet. She was wise not to. Sandra had been so willing to use it. She put on her nightgown and went to bed. Max went out into the garden and walked past the pool to a big wooden bench enclosure. Inside were 3 dogs that looked just like Maximum. They were all his children. Every was Elaine stroked each one, in turn, making small growling noises. "Yes, boys, your turn is tomorrow," she said. "Everyone can have a new chick."